You think you're somebody because you push a mop? God, I think you missed a spot by the heavy bag. Son, careful, the floor's damp. He calls me son. You hear that? The janitor thinks he's my old man. God, just watch your step. That's all I'm asking. God, sweep faster, Grandpa. I've got rounds to hit and you're in my way. God, Jace Haldane laughed, and the laugh carried across every corner of West Shore Athletic Club, bouncing off the cinder block walls the way cruel sounds do in rooms built for impact. He didn't know the security guard he had just shouldered into a mop bucket had cornered 3 world champions before breakfast was a meal Jace could spell. Have you ever watched someone mock a person who could end them with a breath and felt the whole room hold its silence because nobody had the spine to speak? 4:30 in the morning, Vancouver. The rain did what Vancouver rain does in November. Fell without apology, steady as a pension check, turning the alley behind West Shore Athletic Club into a mirror nobody wanted to look at. Amos Rennick unlocked the service door with the same key he'd used for 11 years, the teeth worn smooth, the lanyard faded to the color of dishwater. He didn't flip the overheads. He never did. The emergency strips gave him enough to see by, and he preferred the gym before the egos arrived. He filled his bucket from the utility sink. He measured the soap, always the same capful, never guessed, never sloshed. Then he mopped the main floor in wide, patient arcs that never doubled over themselves. Most people clean a gym. Amos diagnosed one. A drag mark by the south bag meant someone was dropping their back foot on the cross. A scuff pattern near the ring apron told him which Thursday night amateur was favoring his left knee again and lying to his trainer about it. 11 years of reading a floor will teach you things an MRI charges $400 to confirm. He was 56, lean in the way cables are lean, with close-cropped gray hair and hands that looked like they'd been carved from the same Manitoba oak as the tool handles he'd grown up swinging on his uncle's farm outside Portage la Prairie. He moved without hurry, but if you watched long enough, strange things surfaced. He never stood flat. Weight always lived on one foot or the other, ready to pour somewhere. His cleaning rags were folded in exact thirds, corners tight as origami. One morning, a speed bag snapped its swivel and dropped. His hand was under it before the chain finished swinging. A coach nearby blinked. "Lucky grab," she said. Amos only nodded. Luck was a word he let other people borrow. Home was a narrow clapboard house in East Van, paid off and quiet. The yard kept sharp because a man who lets the outside go is a man losing the argument with the inside. On the mantel stood one photograph, face down, dusted weekly, never turned. In the bedroom closet sat a canvas duffel bag with a brass zipper that hadn't opened in 14 years. Around his neck, under every shirt he owned, hung a small brass key on a leather cord. It sat against his sternum like a second heartbeat. Some nights he held the bag on his lap and rested his palm flat on the canvas. He never unzipped it. He just sat with it until the house stopped making sounds and the rain took over. Jace Haldane trained at West Shore the way landlords visit buildings, like the place existed to frame him. 24 years old, an undefeated amateur light heavyweight, 14 wins, 11 by stoppage, and a highlight reel that played on loop behind his eyes every waking minute. The talent was genuine. That was the tragedy. Talent without gravity floats until it pops. His combinations cracked the pads like rifle shots, and after every crack, his gaze drifted to the mirror to make sure the mirror was paying attention. Behind Jace stood his father, Thatcher Haldane, who had built half the glass towers, crowding False Creek and liked to remind people which half. Thatcher's name sat on West Shore's largest sponsorship plaque. The gym's manager, Lyle Creighton, had framed that plaque beside the fire exit like a restraining order against his own conscience. Lyle had one rule: keep the Haldanes comfortable. Whenever Jace's jokes crossed a line, Lyle found paperwork to study until the laughing stopped. People said Lyle wasn't a bad man, just a man whose backbone was on a month-to-month lease. Wendy Ning worked the front desk and missed nothing the cameras caught. She liked Amos. He remembered her daughter's birthday. He left the break room cleaner than a crime scene. One Thursday evening, she watched a 10-year-old kid named Tomas shadowboxing alone in the corner after the youth class had ended. His mother's bus was late. His guard was a mess. Elbows flared, chin up, weight leaking backward like water from a cracked pail. The coaches had gone home. Nobody was watching. Nobody except the man pushing a mop. Amos passed behind the boy and paused. He tapped the kid's back heel with the mop handle. He turned the boy's hip 2 inches clockwise. He pressed one finger to the underside of the boy's chin and tilted it down a 1/4 inch. Then he walked on as though he'd done nothing more interesting than step over a crack in the sidewalk. Tomas threw the same jab. It snapped like a towel in a locker room, a sound that had no business coming from a 60-pound child. The boy stared at his own fist. Wendy froze at the desk, phone ringing, forgotten against her ear. Amos pushed his bucket into the dark corridor, humming something low and old, a hymn or a lullaby. She couldn't tell which. And for the first time, the question that would crack the whole story open floated up like steam from a sidewalk grate. Who taught the night guard to rebuild a fighter's stance with 2 fingers and a mop handle? Saturday came loud. Jace Haldane had just taken his 15th straight win, a second-round stoppage across town at the PNE Forum, and he returned to West Shore carrying the belt and the belief that everyone in the building owed him eye contact. 40-odd members crowded the mats. Phones appeared before his jacket came off. He replayed his knockout on the gym's wall-mounted screen. Twice. Then he got bored. Bored champions hunt for entertainment, and entertainment was pushing a mop along the back wall. What happened next lasted 9 seconds. Every camera in the room caught it. Jace crossed the floor grinning, grabbed the old man by both shoulders, and shoved. Amos hit the concrete hard. His bucket flipped, and gray mop water soaked his shirt, his trousers, the left side of his face. The gym roared. 40 phones pointed down at him like accusation fingers. Easy there, Pops. Just having a laugh. Somebody get the janitor a life jacket. Amos lay in the spreading puddle for one breath. Then he rose the way old men rise, when pride is the only joint that still works on the first try. He didn't look at Jace. He righted the bucket. He repositioned the wet floor sign. He began mopping the same stretch of concrete in wide, patient arcs while 40 phones filmed his soaked back. One person in that gym wasn't laughing. Tomas stood by the cubbies, gym bag over one shoulder, watching the man who had fixed his stance get treated like a punchline. Amos caught the boy's eyes for half a second, then looked away, because some injuries land deeper than a floor. By 9 that night, the clip owned the internet. Jace posted it with a caption, "Mop Man Down Ing," and it crossed 200,000 views before the rain stopped. Strangers stitched it, slowed the old man's face for comedy, added sound effects to the splash. In the comments, exactly 5 people asked if he was all right. Across the city, in a narrow clapboard house, Amos Rennick sat on the edge of his bed. His wet uniform dripped over the bathtub. The canvas duffel rested on his knees. 14 years the brass key had stayed warm against his chest and cold to its purpose. Tonight his thumb traced the zipper pull once, twice. Then slowly, for the first time since the funeral, Amos Rennick pulled the zipper open. 3 things inside. A pair of Cornerman's wraps, white gone ivory, stiff with the sweat of 10,000 rounds. A photograph of 4 people standing under a banner that read National Boxing Championships, Halifax. And a phone, years out of date, kept charged by a habit he had never explained to anyone, plugged into the outlet behind his nightstand every single night. He looked at all 3 for a long time. He touched none of them. At 2 in the morning, he closed the bag, zipped it shut, hung the key back under his shirt, and lay down in the dark. Jace woke up famous. Not fight famous, internet famous, which is louder and cheaper. Mop Man Down crossed 3 million views in 4 days. His follower count jumped 60,000. A supplement company slid into his messages. Jace scrolled the numbers in bed and learned the oldest lesson of the algorithm. Cruelty performs. His knockouts took 8 weeks of camp. The janitor clip took 9 seconds. So when his manager asked what came next, Jace didn't say a title shot. He said, "Give the people a sequel." The sequels came all week. Monday, Amos found his supply cart padlocked inside the sauna, handles burning. Tuesday, someone dumped a full tub of chalk powder across the lobby floor he'd just finished. Jace filmed the old man kneeling in the white dust, captioned it, "Mop Man, the prequel." Wednesday brought a new game. Jace blocked the corridor and wouldn't move until Amos bowed. "Bow to the champ, Pops. It's tradition." Amos bowed, small and slow, eyes on the floor. The camera loved it. The followers loved it more. Wendy reported it to Lyle twice. Twice Lyle studied his clipboard. "Boys let off steam," he said. "Amos hasn't filed a complaint." That part was true. Amos never complained. But Wendy had begun doing something quiet at the front desk. Every night, before the security system's 30-day auto-wipe, she copied the day's footage onto a portable hard drive she kept in the glove box of her Corolla. She didn't know why yet. She just knew someone should. Thursday night, Amos sat in his truck in the West Shore lot, too tired to drive. He took out the old phone, one saved voicemail. He'd paid TELUS for 14 years to keep that number alive. His thumb knew the path in the dark. "Hey, Dad, it's me. We just passed Hope, making good time. Should be there by 6. Coach Rennick and Champion Rennick on the same program. That's gonna look wild in the papers. Love you. Leave the porch light on. I'm bringing the belt home." A 19-year-old voice, bright as a morning that never came. Amos listened twice. He didn't cry. He'd done his crying in rooms this city never saw. He pressed save the way he always pressed save, and drove home. By Friday, the numbers dipped. The internet was getting bored, and Jace could feel it the way animals feel weather shifting. Pranks were appetizers. The audience wanted a main course. That night, he posted a poll. "Should the janitor fight me?" 93% said yes. Jace stared at the result. Somewhere beneath the grin, in a room of himself he never visited, a small voice asked why an old man's quiet unsettled him this much. He muted it the way he muted everything that wasn't applause. Saturday afternoon, the gym was packed for open sparring. Jace killed the music and climbed onto a bench. West Shore, give it up for the real star of my page, Mop Man himself. Laughter. 40 cameras swung to the back wall where Amos stood with his cart. Wendy, at the desk, quietly angled security camera 4. Jace hopped down and crossed the floor. "Oops, did I shove you again, Pops? My bad." The push was lighter this time, staged for the lens. Amos steadied his cart. "Floor's wet, son. Watch your step. Hit me, old man." Free shot. "I don't fight, sir." "Course not. Mops don't hit back. Get in the ring. 60 seconds with me, or kneel down and polish my belt. I'm 56 years old, son. Then you'll fold easy. Swing at me. I'll close my eyes." Phones pressed closer. A chant started. "Fight, fight, fight," and it caught. Jace peeled $300 bills from a money clip and slapped them on the ring apron. 300 says you can't lay a glove on me, old man." "Keep your money," Amos said. "Buy yourself a mouth guard." "A mouth guard? Why?" "Because everyone hits the canvas eventually, son. Some just haven't been introduced to the floor yet." The gym went strange and quiet, the way a room does when the script stops being followed. Jace blinked, laughed louder to fill the silence. "Tomorrow, noon. Mop Man versus the champ. 60 seconds. Be here." The crowd roared back to life. Lyle appeared at the edge of the mats, glanced at the money, and walked to his office. Wendy watched Amos push his cart toward the supply closet. His hands were steady. His arcs stayed even. Only his jaw had changed, set like a door finally closing. In the supply room, Amos sat on an overturned pail among the bleach bottles and spare mats. He opened the calendar on his phone. Tomorrow's date looked back at him in small gray digits, November the 17th. His chest tightened around a 14-year-old wound. November the 17th was the day the RCMP had knocked on his door with their hats against their chests, the day a westbound sedan never made it past Hope on the Trans-Canada. Of every day in the year, Jace Haldane had chosen the anniversary of Zora Rennick's death. 60 seconds, the boy had said. Amos closed the phone and stared at the wall. Sunday came up gray and damp. Before the streetlights switched off, Amos stood in Mountain View Cemetery with 2 folding chairs and 1 Tim Hortons double-double. He set a chair beside each stone. Lorraine Rennick, beloved wife. Zora Rennick, 19 forever. He drank half the coffee and tipped the rest into the grass between them. "They want me in the ring today, sweetheart." he told Lorraine Stone. On her day, the cedars moved. He turned to Zora's Stone and sat a long while. "I'm not going to hurt that boy," he said finally. "I'm going to introduce him to himself." From his truck, he made one phone call. It rang twice. "Deshaun, it's Coach." Silence. Then a breath that sounded like a man sitting down hard. "Coach Rennick. My God. Noon today. West Shore Athletic Club. I need a witness." "A witness to what?" 60 seconds. At home, Amos opened the closet and pulled the canvas duffel down from the shelf. He took out the cornerman's wraps, white gone ivory, and folded them into the pocket of a plain gray tracksuit. He left the photograph in the bag. He would not carry rank against a child. Defense only, he promised the empty house. Not one punch. By 11:30, the parking lot was full and the internet was expecting a beating. It would get an education. Noon arrived like a held breath. 300 people ringed the main floor inside West Shore and thousands more floated in Jace's live stream. Jace bounced in his corner in a fresh team jacket, rolling his neck, mugging for the lens. The $300 sat under a water bottle at the ring apron. Lyle stood where managers stand when they want to be visible and blameless. At 12:01, the crowd parted, laughing, phones high. Amos Rennick walked through in a plain gray tracksuit. No gloves. Bare hands, wraps only, feet in worn canvas shoes. The laughter stuttered. Something about the way he walked confused the room. No shuffle now. Each step landed silent and precise, weight pouring from foot to foot like water finding level. In the back row, a broad-shouldered man in a dark hoodie lowered his coffee and went very still. "Nice pajamas, Pops," Jace called, arms wide. "You grabbed those from Lost and Found. They were a gift. Are you ready?" 60 seconds, Amos agreed. "Try to listen." "Listen to what?" "Your own breathing, son. It's about to get very loud." Lyle raised an awkward hand and dropped it. Someone hit a phone timer. 60 seconds began. Jace came out fast, feinted a jab, threw his trademark overhand right, the one that had dropped 14 men. It hit nothing. Amos was simply not where the fist arrived. Head off the center line by 3 inches. No more, no less. The gym heard it before it understood it. The whisper of canvas shoes on vinyl, the snap of Jace's sleeve cutting empty air. A left hook whistled through the space where an old man's ribs had been a half-second before. A shovel hook passed over a chin that had already dipped beneath it like a nod of polite disagreement. Amos never blocked. Blocking is for people who show up late. He turned, shifted, breathed, and the floor beneath him barely registered the conversation. 20 seconds in, nobody was laughing. Jace's breathing got loud, just as promised. He swung harder, which made him slower, which made the air he hit feel heavier. In the live stream chat, the jokes were dying mid-keystroke. Someone typed, "Is this real?" Someone else typed, "The janitor is a ghost." The viewer count passed 90,000. Jace heard none of it. All he heard was his own lungs and the soft, patient slide of 2 wrapped hands that would not stay in front of him. At 31 seconds, Jace abandoned boxing and lunged, both arms reaching, trying to clinch. What happened next would be replayed 11 million times in slow motion. Amos dropped his center of gravity, caught the incoming shoulder, and pivoted. Just pivoted. Jace's own momentum did the rest, rolling him over a quiet hip and laying him flat on his back. The sound of the landing went through the floor like a dropped piano. 300 people inhaled at once. Nobody exhaled. Jace stared at the ceiling, lungs empty, pride emptier. The old man stood over him, one hand extended. "Breathe, son. You're all right. The floor caught you." Jace slapped the hand away and scrambled up. At the front desk, Wendy had stopped pretending to work. On her monitor, security camera 4 held the wide-angle no phone could match. She glanced at the red recording light and clicked protect. The second fall came at 43 seconds. Jace charged blind, 210 pounds of humiliation reaching for a throat. Amos stepped off the line, guided the reaching arm past its target, and let the boy's momentum author its own ending. Jace hit the mat face first, slid half a meter, and stopped at the feet of his own live-stream tripod. His camera looked down at him. 90,000 strangers looked with it. 10 seconds left. Jace rose with something broken loose behind his eyes. He grabbed a metal water bottle from the apron and swung it at the old man's head. The crowd screamed. Amos swayed inside the arc, trapped the swinging arm at the wrist, and turned his hip one final time. But this throw was different. Halfway through the fall, Jace's skull was aimed at the concrete lip beyond the mat. Amos's palm shot out and cupped the back of the boy's neck. He pulled him in. He gave the fall back to the soft vinyl. He laid Jace down the way you lay down something you've decided to keep from breaking. The phone timer sang. 60 seconds. Finished. Amos Rennick had not thrown a single punch. He stood in the center of the floor, breathing the way people breathe in libraries, and bowed to the boy gasping at his feet. Then he picked up his canvas bag, left the $300 untouched, and walked toward the locker room through a silence you could have framed and hung on a gallery wall. Jace stayed on the mat, staring at the lights. 60 seconds earlier, he'd been a champion. Now he was a meme being born in real time, and somewhere in his chest, beneath the rage, lived a feeling he couldn't name yet. It felt almost like awe. He buried it fast and reached for anger instead. Anger was familiar. Anger had a father. At the edge of the crowd, Tomas started clapping, alone at first. Then the youth class joined, then their parents. Then the room, a rolling thunder of palms that Jace Haldane would hear in his sleep for months. The man in the dark hoodie didn't clap. Deshaun Pritchard just watched the gray tracksuit disappear down the corridor and whispered to no one, "He's still perfect." By evening, the internet had a new fixation: the full live stream, the slow-motion breakdowns, the freeze frame of an old hand cradling the neck of the boy who had swung steel at him. Boxing channels dissected the footwork frame by frame and arrived at the same stunned verdict. This is not luck. This is mastery you cannot purchase. The clip crossed 6 million views before midnight, beneath one question repeated in every language the internet speaks. Who is the janitor? 40 floors above Cole Harbor, Thatcher Haldane watched his son slide across a mat on a phone screen, face down in front of the entire world. He watched it twice. He didn't call Jace. He didn't ask if the boy was hurt. He scrolled to a name his money kept on speed dial, a name that had buried lawsuits, rivals, and inconvenient truths with equal efficiency. Philippa Strand answered on the first ring. "Counselor," Thatcher said quietly, "I need you to destroy a janitor." Philippa Strand didn't take cases. She took territory. Monday morning, she sat in Thatcher's glass office with the live stream playing on a wall screen, watching an old man embarrass her newest retainer's son. She watched without expression, the way surgeons examine imaging. "Your son challenged him publicly," she said. 300 witnesses. He swung a metal bottle. This is unwinnable in any honest room. Thatcher slid a folder across the desk. "Then we don't fight the truth. We replace it." The folder held the architecture of a lie, a medical report, real enough, showing Jace's sprained wrist and bruised vertebrae from 3 uncontrolled falls. A drafted statement in which Jace recalled being threatened, and a strategy built on one fact about the internet. Nobody watches the whole video. "We sue for assault," Strand said. "Civil court. We argue the guard is a trained fighter who concealed his abilities, provoked a young athlete, and injured him in front of minors." She looked up. "I'll need the gym's cooperation." Thatcher smiled. "I own the gym's cooperation." Jace sat through the meeting saying almost nothing, his arm in a sling he'd been told to wear everywhere. The sling was theater. His wrist ached, but it worked. What didn't work was sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the old man's palm catching his neck, gentle as a parent settling a child into a car seat, pulling his skull away from the concrete. The man he was about to destroy had saved him mid-throw. Jace knew it. The footage knew it. "Sign here," Strand said, and Jace Haldane picked up the pen. The new video dropped Wednesday, 90 seconds, surgically edited. Gone was the shove, the money, the taunting, the water bottle. What remained was an old man in a tracksuit throwing a young athlete onto his neck 3 times while children watched from the front row. The caption wrote itself: "Hidden fighter assaults local champion." By Thursday, the local news ran it with a tilted headline: 58-year-old security guard with mysterious combat training injures young athlete at family gym. The anchors used the word disturbing twice. The comment sections turned like weather. The same internet that had crowned Amos on Sunday burned him by Friday. Why was a trained fighter guarding a gym full of kids? What was he hiding? Who hires these people? 6 million views of the truth were buried under 30 million views of the lie. A man with no social media cannot answer 30 million views. Amos didn't try. He went to work Monday morning and found his key no longer fit the service door. Lyle met him in the parking lot with an envelope and a speech he'd practiced badly. Liability issue. Amos, nothing personal. The board, the insurance. You understand. Amos looked at the envelope. 11 years folded into 2 weeks severance. The Haldanes are also reviewing your pension eligibility, Lyle added, eyes on the wet asphalt. Their lawyer found some paperwork irregularities. Could all go away, though. He dropped his voice. They want a public apology. On camera. Say you provoked the boy. Say you're sorry. Thatcher makes the lawsuit vanish. You keep your retirement. For a long moment, the only sound was rain hitting the hood of Amos's truck. I mopped that floor 11 years, Amos said. Never missed a corner. You tell Mr. Haldane my knees don't bend that direction. He handed the envelope back, unopened, and drove away. Lyle stood in the rain holding 2 weeks of money like a man holding his own letter of resignation. Not everyone believed the news story. Tomas's mother called the gym to defend him and got voicemail. A handful of members posted the original live stream, pointing at the shove, the money, the bottle. Their posts gathered hundreds of views against Strand's millions. The truth was present at the battle. It was just outnumbered. That afternoon, Lyle called Wendy into his office and closed the door. The lawsuit named the gym's security system. Strand's people want the retention policy enforced, he said, not meeting her eyes. 30-day auto-delete. Make sure the system is compliant. Wendy understood perfectly. Sunday's wide-angle footage, the footage showing the shove, the bottle, the catch, was 11 days from a hearing and 1 click from gone. Of course, she said. That night, she sat in her Corolla with the hard drive in her lap, hands shaking, and burned 2 more copies. The summons arrived Saturday by registered mail. Haldane v. Rennick. Damages sought, $900,000. Amos read it twice at his kitchen table, then set it beside a stack of bills and his pension statement. The math was simple and merciless. Even winning would bankrupt him. Lawyers cost more than night guards earn. That evening, the old doubts returned wearing new suits. 14 years ago, he'd walked away because the ring took his daughter. Now he'd stepped onto a mat for 60 seconds, and it was taking the rest. His house, his name, his quiet. Maybe the lesson was the same one on repeat. Everything he loved, the fighting life eventually collected. He took out the old phone that night and held his thumb over the saved voicemail. For the first time in 14 years, he didn't press play. He was afraid of what he'd hear beneath it. Not Zora's voice, but the sound of his own failure echoing underneath. He set the phone face down on the nightstand and lay in the dark with his eyes open. The hearing was set for a Tuesday 11 days away. Strand fed the press. An anonymous source said the guard had a violent history. Another wondered why no boxing club in BC had records of him. The story shaped itself into the form money required. By Monday night, the man who had refused to throw a single punch was the most hated old man in Vancouver. He was sitting in the kitchen that Monday night with cold coffee and the summons when headlights swept the window. Then a second pair. Then a third. Car doors in the driveway, 1, 2, 3, unhurried. Amos rose slowly. 56 years old, sued, fired, famous for all the wrong reasons. He had no idea who would come for him at 10 at night. The knock was soft, almost respectful. He opened the door. 3 people stood on the porch in the November rain, and 14 years stood behind them. Deshaun Pritchard, shoulders filling the doorframe. Katarina Voss, Olympic bronze, posture like a drawn bow. Ruben Okonkwo, tailored overcoat, gym chain logo stitched on his cap. Nobody spoke. Then Katarina stepped forward and hugged the old man so hard the porch light flickered. "You stopped answering letters, coach," she said into his shoulder. So we stopped writing. We came instead. They sat in his kitchen until 2 in the morning. Deshawn had flown in for the challenge and stayed for the lawsuit. He'd called the others the night the doctored video dropped. Amos tried twice to send them home. This is my mess. Reuben set his mug down. Coach, you taught us the first rule of the corner. Nobody fights alone. Amos looked at 3 faces he had built from nothing. And for once, the old man ran out of arguments. Tuesday. The hearing room was small, but the story was not. The corridor outside filled with cameras. Judge Annette Fong, precise, unhurried, with reading glasses and no patience for theater, called the room to order. Thatcher sat behind his lawyer like a man who'd already read the last page. Jace sat beside him in the sling, eyes down. Amos came alone in his church suit, hands folded, representing himself because he could afford nothing else. Strand worked the room like a scalpel. She played the edited clip on a courtroom screen. She used the phrase, concealed combat training, 4 times. Mr. Rennick, what belt do you hold? I hold no belt, ma'am. What rank have you achieved? Rank fades when you stop claiming it. Answer the question. Cornerman's certification. 3 disciplines. Training pedigree, national program level. Murmurs. She faced the judge. A man with that background is a weapon, Your Honor. A weapon who worked beside children for 11 years without disclosure. Amos said little. Slow answers, short answers. The way truth sounds when it isn't auditioning. Why did a man with your credentials spend 11 years guarding a gym, Mr. Rennick? What were you hiding from? For the first time, the old man's hands tightened on the table. The room leaned in. Even Judge Fong looked up. Amos opened his mouth, closed it again. Some doors don't open in public. Strand smiled at the silence and let it testify for her. No further questions. And that was when the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Deshawn Pritchard walked up the aisle in a Boxing Canada jacket, and half the room recognized him before he reached the bar. 3-time national middleweight champion, current head coach of the national program. He asked to be heard as a character witness, and Judge Fong, curiosity overruling procedure, allowed it. Deshawn raised his right hand, took the oath, and looked straight at the press row. My name is Deshawn Pritchard. The man you've been calling a hidden threat is Amos Rennick. We called him the Quiet Left. He trained me from a 14-year-old kid throwing haymakers in a church basement to a national champion. He also trained Katarina Voss and Reuben Okonkwo. He paused. Stand up, please. 2 people rose in the gallery. Katarina Voss, Olympic bronze, 2 Commonwealth titles. Reuben Okonkwo, undefeated super middleweight, owner of 9 gyms across 4 provinces. A murmur became a roar that Judge Fong had to gavel down. Strand was on her feet, objecting to relevance. Judge Fong peered over her glasses. Counselor, you spent 40 minutes arguing this man's training history. His training history just stood up, overruled. You asked what he was hiding from, Deshawn's voice dropping. I'll answer because he never will. 14 years ago, Coach had a 4th fighter, the best of us. His daughter, Zora. Amos went very still. Zora was 19. She died in a highway collision east of Hope. Driving to the national championships her father had spent 10 years preparing her for. Coach buried his girl on a Friday. He locked his wraps in a bag. He never cornered another fighter. Deshawn looked at the old man and his voice cracked on the next sentence. He didn't quit fighting because he was dangerous. He quit forgiving himself. There's a difference. Amos looked at his open hands, the hands that had wrapped Zora's wrists before every bout, the hands that had carried the casket through November rain, not so different from the rain falling outside right now. Nobody saw the old man cry, but his shoulders dropped finally, the way a man's shoulders drop when he sets down something he has carried up a very long hill. The room had gone quiet in a way courtrooms almost never manage. A reporter in the 2nd row pressed her sleeve to her eyes. Jace stared at the old man's back, and the sling on his arm suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. Then the 2nd door opened. Wendy Ng came up the aisle holding a silver hard drive like it was made of glass. She had quit West Shore that morning by text. Under oath, she told the court about the deletion policy and the copies she had made. Judge Fong ordered the footage played. The full Sunday, the shove, the money slapped down, the taunting, the steel bottle swung at a gray head, and then the frame the judge asked to see twice. The old man's palm catching the back of Jace Haldane's neck, pulling him away from concrete, laying him down on the soft vinyl like something worth saving. When the lights came up, nobody spoke. On the screen, frozen, an old man held a boy's head an inch above ruin. Strand's 90-second story had just been undone by its own missing footage. In the gallery, Tomas's mother stood and said loud enough for the record, "That man is the only adult in that gym who ever watched out for my son." Judge Fong let it stand. Strand asked for a recess. The judge gave her 10 minutes. It took 3. Whatever was said at the plaintiff's table was said through clenched teeth. When the room reconvened, Strand stood with a face like wet cement. "Your Honor, my client moves to withdraw the complaint with prejudice." Judge Fong removed her glasses. I imagined he might. She looked at Thatcher Haldane for a long, unhurried moment. This court also imagines the Crown prosecutor will have questions about who edited that video. Withdrawal. Granted. The gavel came down like a clean throw. The room erupted. Reporters sprinted for the hallway, Thatcher already hissing at Strand. Amos sat motionless, Katarina's hand on his shoulder. 14 years of silence broken open in a single morning. Then, over the noise, a chair scraped. Jace Haldane was on his feet. He pulled the sling over his head, dropped it on the table, and said 5 words nobody expected. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Judge Fong could have refused. The case was withdrawn, the morning already historic. But she looked at the boy standing without his sling and nodded once. Jace didn't go to the witness stand. He turned to face the gallery and the cameras he had spent years performing for. "Everything Mr. Pritchard said is true. Everything Wendy showed you is true. I shoved him because he was a janitor and I thought janitors were furniture." His voice broke and he let it. He never threw one punch at me. The third fall, I was going headfirst into concrete. He caught me. The man I was trying to ruin caught me. He faced Amos last. I picked November 17th for the fight. I didn't know what that date meant. Now I do, and I can't give it back. He bowed. Clumsy, unpracticed, the first honest bow of his life. "I'm sorry, Mr. Rennick." Amos studied him for a long moment and said nothing. Some apologies need to season before they earn an answer. The consequences arrived like dominoes that had been waiting patiently in line. The Provincial Athletic Commission reviewed the unedited footage and stripped Jace's amateur titles for conduct. The water bottle alone settled the debate. His sponsors evaporated by Friday. The supplement brand released a statement containing the word values 3 times. Thatcher Haldane fared worse. The Crown opened an inquiry into the doctored video, and his partners, smelling weather, backed out of 2 waterfront developments. The West Shore Board, suddenly brave, voted Lyle Creighton out before lunch on a Wednesday. He carried his framed plaque to the car himself. Wendy turned down 3 job offers from news outlets and accepted one from a law firm on West Hastings. 2 weeks later, the West Shore Board called Amos Rennick into the office that used to ignore him. They offered him the head coaching position, full salary, his name on the wall. Amos listened with his hands folded. "I'll take it," he said, "on one condition. Tuesday and Thursday nights, the main floor belongs to the neighborhood. Free boxing fundamentals for every kid who walks through the door. No fees, no tryouts." The board agreed before he finished the sentence. "One more thing," Amos added. "It has a name. The Zora Rennick Program." Nobody in the room argued with that. On the first night of the program, 34 children sat cross-legged on the main floor, Tomas front and center. Amos walked in, carrying the canvas duffel and a hammer. First, he drove a small nail into the wall beside the door and hung a photograph face out where it would watch every class. A girl of 19, grinning under a tournament banner, forever about to win. Then Amos opened the bag in front of everyone, lifted out the ivory wraps, and wound them around his hands with fingers that did not shake. 14 years of silence ended in 2 quiet knots. "First lesson," he told the kids, voice carrying to the corners the way it used to. "The strongest thing you will ever learn on this floor is how to walk away from a fight." The second strongest is knowing you could have stayed. 34 heads nodded like it was gospel. In the back, leaning on the doorframe, Deshaun Pritchard grinned at Katerina Voss. The quiet left was loud again. Amos was halfway through teaching them how to fall when the gym door opened. Jace Haldane stood there in plain gray sweats. No logos, no entourage, no camera. The room went still. Every child recognized his face. Everyone in British Columbia recognized his face. Jace crossed to the edge of the mat, stopped at the tape line like a man at a border, and bowed. "Mr. Rennick, teach me the right way. I'll start from nothing." Amos looked at him for a long, level moment. Then he pointed at the supply closet. "Grab a mop first," he said. "The floor teaches humility. Lesson 1 starts there." Jace Haldane, former champion, sponsorships gone, walked to the closet and picked up a mop in front of 34 children. And here is the strange part. Nobody laughed. The boy who had filmed an old man falling now moved a bucket in careful lines while the old man taught children how to stand. 6 months later, the Zora Rennick program had a waiting list. Then, a second location. By spring, it would have 5 in 5 cities across 3 provinces, each one opened by a phone call Amos never asked anyone to make. Deshaun coached Tuesdays in Vancouver. Katerina flew in once a month and taught footwork, which she called the most honest skill on earth. Ruben paid every bill and declined every interview. Jace was there every night, and he was easy to miss, which was new for him. He wore plain white like every beginner. He swept the mats before class and mopped them after, in wide, patient arcs that never crossed their own path, because he had asked the old man to show him how. His followers shrank to a fraction of what they'd been. He never posted again. A reporter cornered him in the parking lot once and asked if this was a redemption arc. Jace thought about it. "No," he said. "It's just Tuesdays." Amos still arrived at 4:30. Some habits are load-bearing. He still read the floor while he walked it, still folded his rags in perfect thirds. But the photograph by the door faced out now, and he'd started talking to it again. Small things, scores, stances, which kid finally kept her chin tucked. On November the 17th, the program held no classes. The mat stayed empty and the lights stayed on, one night a year, for a champion who never got to arrive. Nobody scheduled it. Everybody honored it. Tomas, 11 now, earned his first stripe in January. When Amos tied it on, the boy whispered something only the two of them heard. Amos laughed, a real one, from the chest. Later, Wendy asked him what the kid had said. The old man smiled and kept mopping a floor he no longer had to mop. Some things are between a coach and his fighter. That answer was the whole story if you were listening. Lyle Creighton manages a storage facility in Surrey now. Thatcher Haldane settled with the crown quietly, the way rich men do, but the towers stopped going up with his name on them. Power, it turns out, is also a floor. It only holds you while you respect it. People still stop Amos on the street and ask about the 60 seconds. They want to hear about the throws. He always tells them the same thing. The fight was never the point. For 11 years, a master swept floors in silence and nobody asked his name. It took 60 seconds of violence to make the world curious about a man that 60 seconds of kindness would have revealed any day of the week. Don't wait for the mat to find out who's standing next to you. So here's the question this story leaves you with. If you were Amos, standing in that puddle with 300 people laughing, would you have stepped into the ring? Or would you have kept mopping? Tell us in the comments, because the answers say more about us than about him. If this story moved you, send it to someone who feels invisible at their job. They might need to hear that Worth doesn't wear a uniform. And subscribe, because we tell a new one every week, and the next one's already waiting. Real talk. The reason I told this story is my grandmother cleaned office towers in Montreal for 26 years. Smartest woman I ever knew. People walked past her like she was part of the building. Somewhere out there right now is a janitor, a cashier, a night guard carrying a whole legend quietly. Be the person who asks their name.